Alright, so we are recording. Hello and welcome to a tutorial on how to bring a modded gun into Operation Harsh Doorstop. So we'll be working with their SDK, which will allow us to fulfill this whole process. Few things you'll need. You'll need to go to Epic. You'll need to download OHD Core Mod Kit. This is where we'll be working overall towards our final steps in modding and bringing the gun in. You'll also need Blender. So both of these are free to download online. I won't show the steps for that. But essentially, so what are we going to accomplish? We'll be importing a gun into the SDK, modifying necessary things to make them functional. We'll be creating a faction in the process as it's a current requirement. We'll be using Blender to assist us through the process. Within Blender, we're going to be using the existing armature, which is kind of the collection of bones for a mesh. And we'll be using that from an existing gun from OHD. And the reason for this is so we can retain the same skeleton, which will allow us to use the animations from in-game so we don't have to create them from scratch. Some of the things that we won't be doing: we won't be creating our own custom animations. We won't be creating our own custom armature. This will not be a highly in-depth modification within the SDK. This is purely, you see a free 3D model or when you've purchased that you have rights to, of course, and you're looking to import that into the SDK. So that is what we're going to be tackling today. I haven't found any videos online, so I figured I'll take it a shot. I'm not an expert in this, but I have had a lot of support from the great modding community within the OHD Discord and the developers who are willing to help people that are starting from scratch, help them get their feet wet. So I'll show some of my folder structure I have going here. I have a test mod folder. This is just kind of getting my work prep set up. My modded gun, so we'll have a FBX file. This is the preferred format you're going to want to go for, and the textures associated. So these are the textures for the gun. We'll have OHD assets because we're going to be doing some little tweaks. So what we'll do is we'll start with loading the OHD SDK. So let that load. And what we'll do is we'll quickly create our own faction. We won't be going into too much depth on how to create a faction. Basically, just to create a simple one so we can have a base for bringing our weapon in. So we'll have a mod with a mod name folder. We'll call it test gun. You can do author, description, create mod. This will create a folder and it will create this data asset file. We'll leave this as it is, but there's 3 asset types: game mode, faction, maps. So we're going to save this, and that's going to be in this folder over here. We'll call it test gun. Okay, so we have this here. So for our structure, we're going to want a few different folders. We're going to want a faction folder. We're going to want a kits folder. And then items. This is kind of following similar structure to what the SDK provides. So over here, we're going to go into HD assets content. So within there, we have factions. And we'll simply take a current faction. So we'll open our folder here. We'll take a current faction, we'll copy and paste it over with Control-C, Control-V. We'll rename this to HD faction. And we'll name it test gun. Okay, so in here you have different parameters you can change. You can change the icon, flag name, so on and so forth. This is where our kits will be, where we'll be putting our modded gun to test. We have our character mesh and whatnot. So we'll leave most of this as it is. We'll change some of these names for the sake of the tutorial. We'll modify this later, most likely. We'll save, compile, And then we'll go to HD Assets Content again. We'll go to Kits, and we'll go Kits over here as well. And we'll copy a kit. We'll do the same thing. So we'll do something simple like the Rifleman. Okay, it's actually over here already. Great. So I'll rename that as well. Rifleman, and we'll call it Test Gun. So this is where we'll have our weapon added. You have item classes, so this is kind of where you'll have the different, like for example, this is a Rifleman with an M16 and M67 and other components to the kit. I guess a very straightforward faction creation. So when we want to run the faction, we're going to be changing the faction info class over here, and this is where it will be, test gun. So that means test gun is going to be facing this other team name. Okay, so we have that pretty much set up for the modding area. So now we're going to want to run our Blender. So this is a basic 3D modeling software. There are loads of tutorials on how to do different things, but for the sake of this tutorial, we're going to focus on doing exactly what we need to do to import the gun into the SDK. So we'll go to File, Import, and we're going to import our FBX file. So we're going to find wherever that is, modded gun, source, Sketchfab. So we'll import this, and then we'll quickly go back to, actually what we'll do one more thing. We're going to press the cube, press X, and then delete. And we're going to go back to Unreal because we're going to do a few things. We're going to customize a little bit. We're going to get rid of this ACOG, and we're going to put in the EOTech from the SDK. So it's like a hollow site. So we'll do that. And the other thing is we'll need a gun to kind of reference this similar gun off of, so we can take the armature, which was discussed kind of earlier in the beginning of the video, but I'll explain that. So we'll need two things. We'll get the optic, and then we'll get the gun that we're going to be basing the armature off of. So we'll go over here, find the EOTech site. So it's over here. So it's a static mesh. So we will right click on it, and we will go to Asset Action, Export. And then we're going to go to wherever our folder is, and I made a OHD assets. So that's going to be that first file. I set the export compatibility to 2018 and everything as it is here. So export. And the next thing we're going to do is get the, we'll base it off the M4A1. I believe this is under Sandbreaker's content. So we want the static, or skeletal mesh, excuse me. So we'll be going for this one right here, SKM4A1. So we'll click Asset Actions, Export, and same thing. So we'll put it in the same directory, same settings, export. Great. So I'll go back here. Like I said, we'll start by, let's see, I have my little notes over here. We'll be deleting the ACOG. So how do you delete the ACOG? Right now this gun is separated into multiple meshes. We don't need the camera because this is just a specific thing to Blender. So we'll delete the camera with just clicking it and then pressing X, and the light as well. So now we just have this. All these little things right here are the separate skeletal meshes. So if you see, I press suppressor, it's over here. PMag, foregrip, ACOG. So we'll go over here. We can actually press on it as well. Middle mouse to rotate, and left click, you can scroll wheel. Shift and middle mouse to kind of move in this direction. So we'll click, X, delete. So now we just have this base gun. Okay. So we'll bring in the EOTech first. So when we bring it in, it's going to be very small. It's right here. We'll leave the scale as it is. All we're going to do is we're going to press G and then Z. Z will allow us to move it in the Z axis, so we'll move it up just for now. So it's right there. We're going to have to actually scale it to that size. So that means our gun is a bit too big, which is fine. Like I said, we'll move it maybe a little bit higher. We'll come back to it. So now we're going to want to import the M4. And why are we importing two guns? So we're importing a second gun so we can base how we need to scale this gun, because there are a few things we got to consider. One thing is our scale. So you can see the gun is the in-game gun right here, this M4, is a lot smaller than our current one. So we've got to do two things. We've got to rotate this gun 180 degrees to face the same direction as the M4, and we got to scale it down. And so we'll start with that. So we'll highlight our gun. What we'll do is we'll hide the M4. Okay, in which case we'll highlight the M4. We'll go to rotation and we'll go to 180 over here on the Z axis, and that'll flip. So we've achieved that. Now to move, because we want to be fairly precise with our movements, we're going to want to, over here we can bring the M4 back, as you can see. So we're going to want to do a few things. We'll want to highlight the gun, and we can press S. Like I said, shift middle mouse to move around. We'll press S, and then we'll move this and make the gun a bit smaller. We'll bring our, scroll wheel in, bring the M4 back over here, and we're going to try to scale this gun as close as possible to the M4. So we're going to have to do a few more movements. We'll have to, while this gun is selected, press G, and then Z. You can go up, and then G and Y. You can go left and right. We'll do S again, and try to decrease the size or scale. And same thing, GY, GZ. So what I like to do is I try to match the trigger finger, or the trigger itself, and the grip and the mag, like this kind of area, as much as I can, because you can move the gun further away in game if the stock is too short. We can even do it here if we wanted, but this is like the big thing you want to do. So we want to try to match this as close as possible. You can actually see that the select fire is kind of close. Try to match everything. Try to get the scale as close as possible. Even the rail, like you can see, the rail is maybe a tad high on our gun, but you try to compensate for what you can. Like, the stock seems to be pretty in line from what it looks like. The barrel looks decent as well. What we can try to do is go maybe a little bit lower with our gun. Maybe a little bit lower so it fits with our rail. Find where that is. It's about there. And then we can assess what's going on with the trigger. Looks fairly decent. Select fire is a little low. Could we scale the gun maybe a little bit bigger or smaller? Actually fairly content with how that looks. Yeah, and it looks like the stock is its own mesh. Okay, so what are we looking at here? So I've hidden the M4. We'll bring the EOTech here in a moment. So we have separate meshes. These are all separate parts of the gun. We're going to ultimately have to join together. There's a few things we got to keep in mind as we're working through here. So let's go to the EOTech. So I'll highlight it and I'll do GZ and bring it down. Okay. So you can see that the sight is actually already kind of scaled to the M4. If you hold Control and middle mouse, like press in middle mouse, you can go on back and forth, and to kind of learn how to maneuver through this software. Alright, so we'll bring this down with GZ, and we'll try to position it to an area that we think is good. So the scale is pretty close, so what we've achieved with that is a mounting that looks somewhat decent from the get-go. We can kind of look at the gapping there and there. It's not bad, relatively close. For in-game, we can kind of keep it there. I think the position is okay. The scale is okay. So this is perfect. One thing to keep in mind with sights, so because we're using an existing in-game asset with the optic, we don't need to do something called UV Unwrapping. And what is that? That is over here. So if we select the EOTech and we go to UV Editing, what we'll see is something very specific regarding the lens. So we're going to try to get the lens here selected. So right here, what we have is the UV unwrap is essentially unwrapping this 3D model into a 2D plane, which is on the left. So it's as if you took a banana and peeled it open. So you have the 3D object when it's together. When you peel it open and you put it flat with all the peels on a table, you have the peels going in all directions. That's what you're looking at on the left. So over here, we went to material properties, and we have two separate things with the EOTech. We've got the optic itself, which shows you the 2D plane and where all of the unwrap is. And this is where we will be getting information from the textures to texture the gun properly. So we're not worried about that one. The big thing we're worried about is the lens. So in this case, this lens material right here. Normally, it's unwrapped and it's scaled properly. So I'll show you over here. So in some cases, the EOTech could be scaled like this and like to the corner, where you would want to highlight it and then unwrap. And then that's going to make it in this size, and then you've got to rotate it and scale it to fill in the space so it looks like this. And this is crucial to do because when we go back in-game, there's a material that we're going to apply on this flat plane, and that'll allow us to see the optic in-game. So the whole point of this is so we can see the optic, the reticle, I should say, in-game. It needs to be UV unwrapped properly, and the size needs to be filled up evenly. So this is already done. So we don't need to do this because it's an in-game asset, but if you're bringing your own optic in, you're going to want to UV unwrap and scale it properly in this UV editing window. That is a big thing. So because of the optic we're using, we don't need to do that, so we'll go back to layout. Okay, so looking at my list, we've scaled the M4 to our liking, to the size that we need. We're going to want to, and we've scaled the EOTech. So we're going to want to create vertex groups. Okay, so there's something called vertex groups, and we're going to want to show you here. So we're going to click on the root folder. Root folder is going to show us all of these bones for the armature. This is what the animations bind to in game, so you can take the magazine out with your hand, so you can change the select fire button, and the dust cover can flap open, the bolt can go back, the charge handle can go back, all of these things. We need to bind the meshes, which are the mag, for example, is a mesh. Every little piece here is a mesh. We want to bind them to the bones. So how do we do that? We do that using weight painting and vertex groups. So where we'll start, we'll first select the root folder here, and then we're going to go to see, I believe it is. Let me find the option real quick here. It's over here under Object Data Properties, Viewport Display. So we're going to click Names and In Front. So now we have all the bones with names and in front. It'll be a little bit easier to spot. We don't need to do this at the moment. But what I like to do is I kind of look at what I have here, what bones I can utilize for the current gun I'm using, and I'll go back to, let's say, the SIG, this gun we're importing. We'll put this gun away, and then we'll go to the M4, and then we can kind of see what's going on. So we're going to click on the weapon, and then once we've selected it, we can press Edit Mode. And when we click off of it, we can actually click on every part here, and these are the vertex groups. So you can see this is selected, the mag release is selected on both sides, the trigger, right, dust cover, things like that. So we need to select these portions for our own gun as well. And these have to be the same name as the bones. As you've noticed, the vertex groups like fire selector, the vertex group for the fire selector right here has the same name as the fire selector bone, which is actually right there, this little thing. So we're matching this setup essentially. So we're going to hide the M4 mesh. We don't need it. We're going to bring back our own. And if you don't know where a certain part is for a bone, for example, you just go back to the gun. So what we'll do is we'll go with tab, we'll go back to object mode, and we'll click on our gun. And we'll temporarily, we can hide the bones. We don't need them at this very moment. So as you can tell, we don't have any vertex groups. So we will have to add them ourselves. How do you do that? So we can press this proportion. What I like to do is I'll follow the bones list over here, so I know what I need to add. I'll click here on like a part of it, for example. Press tab. You can select off, and we can do I believe it's selected, something like that. If you hover over, press L, it'll oftentimes select the whole like bit that you kind of need. So that's essentially what we're going to be doing, and starting from there. So to add a vertex group, you press plus, double click, and you want the name to be the same. So I started off kind of in a, not from the top, but we'll add trigger. Okay, so now we're going to hover over the trigger, press L, and then we're going to go over here. We click our vertex group, we click select, and then assign. Now we've assigned trigger to this highlighted mesh. So how can I test that? I can deselect and then click select, and now it's highlighting. So what other parts from this part of the mesh can we do? We can do the fire selector, which is over here. We can add one called fire selector. Make sure your spelling is exact, otherwise it won't work. So we can press L, and it looks like it's selected the whole thing. What we'll do is, well, actually, what we'll do is, so if we go back to the M4, we can actually see that the fire selector is vertical. So usually these little details you want to try to match so the animations look more proper. So there's a few ways to do this. What we'll try to do is see if we can imitate this. So we'll first get this set up, this fire selector. So we'll highlight it. Highlights it perfectly. Every part of the mesh. It looks like it's floating a little bit, but then we're going to click. You want to make sure when you're done with the trigger, deselect. Click this. Select, assign. So now we're good, right? Okay. Now to turn this thing, we're going to want to press go into Vertex select mode. So we're using the points. We're going to press on one and then shift press the other one. So now if we hold shift press S, we can do cursor to selected, and it's going to put it, this cursor, this 3D cursor over here in this bit. Now, if we select the fire selector and we press R, we can actually turn it, but we don't want to turn it there. So we're going to want to pick a different pivot point. And that is actually done, let's see, at the 3D cursor. So right now we're turning at a different point. We're not using the 3D cursor as our point of rotation. We're not using it. So we're using the 3D cursor now when we select here, and now when we turn, it's actually turning perfectly. But we want to turn it 90 degrees. So we're going to try to press R and type in 90, and it's going to do it vertically, just like how we want. So, but the thing is, you see how it's offset? So we want to make sure that this is perfectly straight. We're going to try to turn it on the y-axis. If you need orientation help, it's up here. You can kind of look where you're at. So we're going to try to press R, Y, and then attempt. Okay, so that's not going to work. Trial and error. We'll try R and Z to do it on the Z-axis. That doesn't work either. Okay, so it's got to be R and X. Okay, so we don't want 90, we're going to want negative 90. Perfect. Okay, so now it's flush. It's like perfectly up and down how we want. Okay. So our fire selector now matches the M4. For the most part, our up and down position is a little off. We can do some tweaking. We could potentially raise the M4 to try to get the animations a little more flush. But as you can see, we do match it with the barrel. It doesn't necessarily have to match it with the barrel. You try to match the gun as much as possible. But these little things for this test, it's fine. Okay, so we'll continue to do what we've been doing. We'll hide the M4. Over here. So let's see, what other stuff do we got? We can quickly check, right? If we go back to the M4 for a moment. Let's see, so we got the fire selector, the mag release is right there. Trigger, dust cover, forward assist. We'll try to match as many as we can. The bolt release is right there. Magazine 1. So it looks like there's 2 mags, so we'll match that. The follower, so if we press here, this is X-ray mode. So we can see there's a follower, which is like inside the magazine. The bullets, it's highlighting all the bullets. Mag 2, which is over here. Sling swivel, we probably won't match that. Charging handle, up here. Bolt, which is the inside mechanism behind the dust cover. Charging handle 2. To add little specifics, it's like the little lever that you push in. And then the rear sight up, rear sight down. Okay, great. So we'll bring our gun back, turn off X-ray mode. And we'll try to match as many as we can. We'll hide the armature because we don't need to see that at the moment. I'll go back to object mode with tab. We'll press the gun, press tab again, and then we'll try to keep adding these. So let's see, mag release. So we know the mag release is right here. So we'll press L. Okay, so that doesn't seem like it'll allow us. So let's go to select mode for the faces. So there we go. We press that, and then over here. So all I did was hover my cursor and press L over both. Okay. So we'll add a plus, add mag release, select it, assign, deselect, select. So we're good there. Everything appears good. Deselect to finish. We'll go next. Try to work a little bit quicker here. Trigger, we've done. Dust cover, which is over here. We'll hover over, press L. It actually did it perfectly because we don't need the hinge point. We'll do select, assign. Everything's good there. Next one, forward assist. Hover over, press L. Looks good. Select, assign. Do the next one. Bolt release. That's over here. Hover over, press L, select, assign. Got that. We'll do magazine 1. So what we can do here is we'll actually have to switch. Interestingly enough, we'll have to switch to the magazine mesh itself because we're only selecting this. We're not actually selecting the magazine because it's separate. So we'll delete it from here. We don't need it here. You do minus. We'll see if there's anything else left on the body portion of the gun. Sling swivel, we'll just ignore. Charging handle, which is up here. So we'll add a charging handle. Which actually looks okay. So we'll press that. Select assign. That's good. And then under it, it looks like we have the bolt. So the bolt is over here. We'll highlight the bolt. We'll add. Type in bolt. Select assign. And then the charging handle too. Which is this little bit. The little clip. Select assign. Good there. And then the rear sights we can ignore. So we'll go out of this. We'll press the magazine. I'll press tab. And we'll do magazine 1. Okay, so we'll go into X-ray mode, which is up here. And we'll see what we got. So it looks like there's no follower. I don't see one, but I see bullets. So what we'll do is we'll match the same scheme that we saw in the M4. So we'll match magazine 1. We'll ignore the follower and we'll have the bullets. So what do we want to do here? We want to not have the entire mag with bullets get selected. So kind of like this. All I did was have X-ray mode open, hovered and pressed L. If you did highlight it, you could deselect it separately. You can attempt it with L and then it should separate it. So we have magazine 1, select assign. Got that. We'll do the bullets. So we'll select the bullets, which we might have to do a little finesse to get to. Try to select all of them. Let's see. So there's one here, 2, 3, 4. Okay. I said hovered over, pressed L on each of them. Select, assign. Perfect. All right. So we pretty much have everything. I think the last thing we need is magazine 2. So what we can do for magazine 2 is we'll just duplicate this first mag and try to match it with the second one. So as you can see, the M4 has the mag over here. What we'll do is, let's see, we'll press the mag mesh and see if we have the bullet selected as well. We do. So copy, Control C, Control V. And then we'll try to grab and then move on the Y-axis. And just to make sure I didn't duplicate the gun. Yeah, see, I did duplicate the gun. So we will undo all that. So I have the gun duplicated. Okay, so we don't have anything duplicated now. Alright, so let's see if we can duplicate this and not the entire gun. It seems like it wants to duplicate the gun for whatever reason. Troubleshooting. Might have to cut this part out. Looks like it's because of it being part of this class. Can we copy specifically here and paste? It just seems to want to do the whole thing. Let's see, maybe we can do this. Unparent this part. See if I select it. Alright. I'm gonna try to separate this over here. Yeah, so all I'm doing now is we actually have a second gun and a separate mag. But what we'll do is we'll click on the mag that we want over here. So we have two of them, but we're only gonna do this one. Click on it and then do Alt P in the actual editor, and then we're gonna clear and keep transformations. So now if we press G and then Y, we can grab and move on the Y-axis, and then we'll delete this mesh right here. So we're going to delete this one. So now we have the second mag. Okay. So the first one's called PMag, which is over here. The second one is called PMag 001. So we're going to want to, most likely, we'll change the name to just like PMag 2. And then we'll drag it, and then we'll hold shift to parent to this folder. So now it's in the same hierarchy because we want it there. And then we have the vertex groups are duplicated. So we want to fix that. So what we'll do is we want to match it to the armature, which is over here. So we had magazine 1, we had magazine 2. So this one will have magazine 1 with bullets, because that's this setup. And then we're going to do this one, magazine 2. So what we'll do is we'll delete here. We'll select, go into edit mode. We'll press L over the other mag. Actually, we want everything. So maybe we can highlight, and if we check X-ray mode, we should be able to highlight everything over here. We want the whole thing. So everything's selected. We want to do select here and assign. So now we're assigning this mag, right? Great. And then we'll have to change the name over here. Okay. So now if we bring the M4 back, we can move this magazine to about where it should be. Press G and then Y. We'll move it on the Y-axis. We'll bring it about there. It's a little bit big, but it's not a problem. Okay. So we've essentially matched the setup we have going. If we check our vertex groups, they should all be selected. Anytime you want to edit them, you have to select the object, press tab, and then this is where you could modify whatever you're doing. So we have magazine 2. If we go back to the gun, we have I'm just checking my spelling at this point. Trigger, fire selector, mag release, dust cover, forward assist, bullet release, charging handle, bolt, charging handle 2. We ignored the sling swivel. We ignored follower because we didn't have it. Rear sight, up and down, we don't need. Everything should be good as of this point regarding weight painting, which is essentially what we are doing. And just to look at my notes here, we're going to also want to make sure that all of these have the same UV map name. So why is that a consideration or issue? If you go over here to object data properties, when you select objects, we're going to want to have everything have the same UV map name, and there should be one. Why do we do this? Because if we're going to have to join all these meshes together. They're going to be under one name. To have them retain their material properties over here, like for example, when I press here, this all has material properties. Like this optic has two parts. It has that red dot and then the body of the optic. This gun has its own material property. This magazine has its own. These are all accessory parts of the gun. Ultimately, they have the same UV map. And why I'm showing you this intentionally is because of the hollow that I brought in. The hollow itself does not have the UV map name. It has UV map 0 and these other subcomponents. So the thing is, we're going to have to remove and rename. We're going to have to remove 2 and rename the 1. So what we'll do is we'll go back to UV editing. And the way we check this is by doing this. So we'll go to material properties. We can check, let's say, the body, right? So over here we have a 2D unfolding of the 3D model. So if we go back to object data properties, we can select through these UVs. So UV0 seems to hold that information. UV map 1 seems to hold nothing, so that seems like it's an unnecessary UV map. And then 2, this is baked in somewhere else we don't have to worry about, so we don't need this one either. This one is going to be obtaining specific texture information from the textures and materials that we'll be making later. But looks like 1 doesn't have anything, and the last one we don't have to worry about. So that is kind of all we'll be dealing with. Same thing here. We'll just need 0. Excellent. So now that we've determined that, what we'll do is we'll go back to layout. We'll remove both. So we go to light map UV, do minus, and then do minus again. And then we're going to want to ensure that it's the same name as the other one. So if we press on the gun, it's just called UV map. So, and make sure our text is exactly the same. So it's UV capital M for map. Same thing here. So we'll edit this. And this is crucial. This has to be, when you join meshes together, when you join everything together, the UV map has to be the same name. If not, it'll push it into different slots and your textures won't work properly in game. If you're doing it intentionally, you likely know what you're doing. If you're doing it for the sake of just trying to import a gun, like very basic tutorial as this is, make sure they match the same name. Okay, so we've talked about that. We talked about UV unwrapping with optics. So what we'll do is we'll join everything together. So when I was joining them, it's going to highlight like the last thing, and that'll be the parent. So we kind of want the body of the gun. So if you press shift click, it'll change it to the gun. So now when we do control J, everything will go under this up here. So here's our gun. Our gun is up here. So now you can see I can't select any more pieces separately. Everything will likely move all together. Okay. Everything is set up there. Everything looks pretty straight, linear, how we want it. Now what we'll do is we want to separate. We want to put the gun under the root what do you call it? Hierarchy. Because the vertex mesh, the mesh itself, the M4A1, is under the root armature. So we want to copy this hierarchy. We essentially want our gun to be above or below the M4. So how do we do that? We should be able to just take the gun and then hold shift and then hover our parent to root. And then what that'll do is it'll drop our gun under this hierarchy, which is exactly what we want. So we've achieved that as well. And now we're going to combine our bones, our armature, to our vertex groups. So how do we do that? So we're going to want to bring the bones back. So we don't see the bones right now because they're hidden. So we're going to press the viewport button here to unhide. So now we see them. Okay, so this is how you do this. What we'll do is we're going to click the gun once, we'll left click. We're going to hold shift and press any bone here and shift click on the bones. And you want to do it in that order. Once you've done that, you hold control and press P, and we're going to set the parent with empty groups. Okay, so now if you've done that and if things work properly, this is how you'll be able to test it. So now we've combined vertex groups to these assigned bones. And the important thing is that I didn't mention earlier is we didn't move any of the positions of the bones. We didn't add any bones, and we didn't remove any. This is the big thing. If you want to use existing animations from in-game, you do not want to add new bones and you don't want to remove any. You can move the bones themselves. You cannot add any new ones or remove any existing because the SDK won't recognize the skeleton that we're going to be using if we modify the skeleton in terms of adding or removing. In this case, I'm just leaving them as they are. We've combined the vertex groups to the bones. And now what we can do is we can press the bones here, go to object mode, go to pose mode. So now if I press, like let's say magazine 1, if I click it and I press G, I should be able to grab and move it. And look, it's grabbed and it's moving. And interestingly enough, because of the hierarchy, the bullets move with the mag. So if I press the bullets now and I press G, I can move the bullets out of the mag. But when I do the mag, the bullets must go with the magazine. So we seem to be pretty much good to go regarding that. Okay. And all I'm doing is Control Z for unediting. Alright, so now that pose mode is good, we've weight painted properly. Now we can go to export. So obviously you want to save this project. I have not saved it at all, but you want to save it. Alright, now we want to highlight everything we're going to export. So when we do that, it's going to highlight the gun and its mesh, and it's going to highlight the armature. These are the necessary things to export with. The root folder with its armature inside, and the mesh. So now if we go to export as an FBX, and we can, we'll go back to our test modded gun, and we'll call this, we'll call it test gun FBX. You want you want a certain preset set up. So I have one called Unreal Export, and I will slowly scroll and show exactly what you need checked off and checked on. Regarding animations, we're not adding new ones, we're using existing ones. So you want to use that preset, which is the Unreal Export. I just called it. You can add one after you set things. You want to make sure you export it that way. So we're going to export FBX. We'll go back to Unreal. And now we'll go to our mod folder, which is over here. We'll go to items, and we'll add, like, let's say test gun. We'll open it. So now we're going to import what we just made. So we're going to import test gun, and the big thing here is we want to match the skeleton of the M4A1 that we based our gun off of. So as we decided that that was going to be the gun, this is the file ultimately that the skeletal mesh bases its skeleton off of is the Skele M4A1. So like I said, we're reusing the skeleton in-game. That way we can use the animations that are already assigned for it. If you don't do this, then you're going to have to create your own skeleton, and you're going to have to create in return your own animations. But as a quick kind of like show you how this works, this is one method that we can do. So we'll import test gun, and we'll find the skeleton, and then everything else here should pretty much match as is. It should be default, similar to your setup. You can pause the video if you need to. Otherwise, everything should be the same. So we'll do import. Alright, cool. So, looks like we were able to bring our gun. You can navigate with WASD, holding right click. You can change the speed up here of the camera. So what we can do is, so our elements over here are actually our parts of the gun that we'll be texturing. If you isolate, you should be able to see certain different aspects of the gun. The lens, the mag. Okay. So we can also test the animations. So if we go over here, our animations actually did load properly. So you can see the magazine is reloading. Great. We can maybe test shooting. So there's like a little mag shake with the trigger pull. So that looks good there. So now we'll have to deal with the materials. So what we can do is we can save this. Things look okay. We'll go to our folder here, to our modded gun and the textures. So there's going to be a few things that we'll need. Let's see. What we'll do is we'll go back here, and we'll do, so we have test gun, and then in here we have the skeletal mesh, and we'll try to keep like a similar, you want to kind of follow whatever mod you're making, the architecture style of the layout of the SDK, for example. So it looks like textures are in the static folder, so we'll make a static folder as well. Static folder, and we're going to want to import all of our textures into here. So we'll do import textures, and we'll bring all of these into this folder. So we'll be importing. Mind you, these are the textures for the gun, but we don't have them for the hollow. So we'll have to actually grab the hollow's textures as well. So we can do hollow, and then we'll find them in here. So if we go EOTech, double click. So here they are. We have the texture here. This is highlighting the lens. Should be able to see the reticle. So this is the reticle is essentially a material that we're going to be applying to that flat plane on the EOTech, so we can see the reticle and then the texture for the optic overall as well. So what we'll do is we'll click browse. So we'll see if we can pop it open somewhere here. See, browse. So it popped it up over here. So we'll Control C, and we'll bring it back to the hollow folder and paste it in here. And we'll rename it like parts test gun. Cool. And then we'll need this other one as well. So we'll search it. Control C, and we'll go back, paste it in here. Rename test gun. So we've got that material that we need. And we'll save all of this as well. All these textures. And we'll make another folder called material. So what are we going to need? We need to make a material instance. So what we'll do is we'll right click material textures, material instance, and we'll call it, I like to do the MAT abbreviation, but that's just something I made up. You know, follow some sort of system that makes sense. If other people are helping you looking at mods, they want to know the naming scheme for it to make some sense. So let's see, we'll do test gun for this mat material. So when you have this open, we're going to want to set the parent to weapon master. Okay, and we're going to want to use the albedo, the normal, and the ORM. Save that for now. And we're going to try to find those here. So the albedo is essentially the color of the gun. So it looks like they've given us the SIG color. We might have to actually do two material instances. It looks like one for the gun, for the SIG 516, and then one for the accessories. So we're going to want to keep that in mind. So go to materials, and then we'll do two different ones. Control copy paste, test gun, and then we'll rename this one to accessories. So we have both set up, because that's kind of what it looks like. So when we're looking at this, the albedo is going to be just the normal colors of the gun. The normal is the normal. The ORM is the ambient occlusion, roughness, and metallic bound into one texture. So it looks like our textures don't have them combined together. So we're going to have to make them. So I've actually given this website a try, and it seems to work. It's called polygon.love.orm. So you can make an ORM in Photoshop. You can Google how to make an ORM. Essentially, it's just moving the occlusion, roughness, metallic in the specific RGB channels, or this website. I've attempted to use this website, and it actually seems to work pretty decently. So let's go to our textures here, and what we'll do is, it looks like we'll need for the accessories, we'll need the ambient occlusion, so we'll just drag it over. So there's that. We'll need the roughness of the accessories, which is right here. Drag that over. And then we'll need the metallic of the accessories, which is over here. Okay, so there's our ORM for the accessories. So let's save this image, and we'll save it into our test modded gun textures, and we'll call it ORM accessories. Save that, and then we'll need to do this again for the SIG itself. So we'll do the ambient occlusion, we'll do the roughness, and then we'll do the metallic. Save image. We'll do ORM test gun. Save. So that should be those two. So let's import them in. You want to save frequently because chances of things crashing. Alright, so let's open our materials. We're going to want both open. And then we'll go back to the textures folder, which is over here. So this is where we're going to want to do a few things. We're actually going to want to take the ORM itself, open up both of them. We're going to go in here and we're going to change the compression settings for both to masks. So we won't go into exact detail why this is done, but this is going to get precise information for how the ORM is to be displayed on the weapon. So you want to do this for the ORMs. If you don't do this, the gun will not look how it's supposed to look. So definitely do this. Big step. Otherwise, you're going to be looking at your gun and wondering why it looks the way it does. Alright. Okay, so let's start with the test gun. We'll go to the albedo for the test gun, which is the SIG. So let's look for the albedo or the color, which is over here. We can click it once, and you can actually click this little arrow. So bring the color in. Okay. Now we're going to bring the normal of the SIG. So there's that, and then we'll bring the ORM, which was this one we made. Okay. So we brought that in. You can actually play with some of these settings like base, specular, metallic intensity, roughness intensity, AO intensity, specular from albedo. You can play with those albedo intensity as well, and if you need to for whatever reason, if the gun doesn't look the way you would like it to. So now we'll do the same thing for the accessories. So we'll start with the albedo or the color, which is, let's see, over here. Click this. Then we'll do the normal for the accessories, and then we will do the ORM. Okay. We saved both. So now we have these materials. So now we'll go to the test gun, and we're going to have to be applying these materials to the material slots. We can actually start with the hollow, just for the heck of it. So we want to first isolate and find, so it looks like this is the lens. So we found the lens. So if we click for element 5, we click the lens, and we click this arrow, it'll apply the hollow. And look, because of that UV unwrapping we spoke about, the material is applied properly. This one is obviously from the SDK already, so it will be applied properly. But if you do your own, you're going to have to do that. Otherwise, it'll look warped and really off. So let's select now the hollow itself, which is element 4. We'll select the material for it and press the arrow. And it looks like it was applied. Great. That looks good. Go back, go to our materials for the gun. And this is where you kind of start. So you can actually name these specifically, like in your 3D modeling software, to get them specific. For example, looks like this is some little bit that for some reason is not highlighted properly, but we'll see if we can apply a texture just for the heck of it. You obviously shouldn't have this kind of happening like I am, but alas, this is modding, trial and error. So let's try it for the gun. So this should be the gun texture. Alright, so it looks like it is. So it did apply. It looks like it's some sort of white SIG, and I applied it pretty decently. Applied it where it's supposed to. Okay. So it looks like these are, I'm going to assume these are the accessories. So that should be this. Okay, so it applied it. Looks like it applied it how it should. Like when we rotated, the fire selector looks pretty spot on. The red dot, obviously this is not functional, but everything seems to be textured in. Okay, we'll continue. This looks like it's one of those off things as well. So we could probably ignore that, as I can't even see the selection. Okay, element 6 is the mags. That should be able to just be taken from the accessories because it's the same UV map, and it is. Okay. So we did that. all that is covered, and the element 7 is all. Oh, okay, so that's the bit of the. Yeah, that's most likely the follower. For whatever reason, it didn't highlight when we wanted. We'll just apply it here and see if anything weird happens. It looks okay. Okay, great. You can actually look at the animations now, like with your gun imported in. So you can see how like the bolt is moving back, the dust covers wiggling, triggers moving, the mag is slightly moving a little bit. All right. So that looks good. Great. So we're actually going to have to take a blueprint. So we'll just take an existing blueprint. A gun needs a static mesh, and then a skeleton, animations, things like that, textures. It also needs a blueprint. So we'll take a blueprint from the M4, same area. So over here we can look at some of these blueprints. We can take, let's say, Sight Up. We'll open it just to see kind of what it looks like. So over here, you can open full blueprint editor and go to viewport. Okay, so we'll just take this blueprint. So what we'll do is we'll Control C, Control V in here. We'll rename this to BP test gun. So we have our own blueprint for the test gun. We'll open the blueprint editor. We'll go to viewport, and this is where we're gonna do a few things. We'll go to the third, so this is the third person mesh and the first person mesh. What the players will see, what you see on your screen, back and forth. We'll go to the third person and we'll change the skeletal mesh to the test gun. So we can click here and then move the arrow. So we've had that. We can go to the first person and do the same thing. Apply those over, save, compile. And then now we're going to want to edit a few things. So we want to edit the default sight. You kind of want to change the camera speed. You want to move this so you're looking pretty much kind of center through the lens. So you can eyeball this going back and forth. Edit it how you wish. You can move the, like how far you're looking back. That might be a little too high. Okay, so we'll leave it about there. There's the default barrel. We don't have to worry about that, or the grip. Bipod's not currently used, and we'll use the muzzle. So we'll grab these arrows. If you can't grab them, you can change the rotation stuff here. So you want the red, which is the X, to face outside. So since we rotated our gun in the 3D program properly, it should face the correct direction. So you want that there. Save, compile. That looks good. So now we're going to go back to our folder and go to kits, and we'll set up our first kit. So just to kind of play around and have the gun work, we made a blueprint and it's called test gun. So if we look that up, that should be here, and it is. So we selected it, we changed whatever the M16 was here to test gun. Save. We'll go back to factions, and now in the faction we made a kit as well over here, right? Called Rifleman Test Gun. So we're going to set that one as, we'll just change it as the first one. And there should be Rifleman Test Gun. So that's there. Save, compile. Perfect. Okay. And we changed, we'll go over here for our faction, and we'll change it to the blueprint for the faction. So we had a blueprint for the gun, the test gun over here, but we have a blueprint for the faction as well that we just edited. We'll set that up there. And we'll go to launch, or play. So you can play up here. Let that load. First load takes a second. Cool, if you press F11, you can full screen. So this should be our first gun here. gun forces is what we're called. So we press here, we can deploy in. So look. So if you press the semicolon button, you can go into third person. And you can see like our camera position is kind of screwed up. But overall, the textures are loaded. There's some things that are kind of off that might be in the model itself. But we can see our weapon. His hand position, obviously, we're just taking the animations from the M4. So there's certain things that you have to be considerate of, such as fingers clipping through the red dot. If you do your own animations, these are things you don't have to worry about, but we're not covering that in this tutorial. You can see the hand grip is actually pretty decent. You might be clipping a little bit, but because of how we matched the gun that we're importing to the existing gun, the M4, it'll make the hand position go exactly where it's supposed to. And also, if we look at the red dot, the reticle, it's actually there. So we press semicolon, we can go back. We can ADS. We can change, obviously, like that stuff. We can shoot. The sounds are taking it from the M4, but look, reload works. We can press X. And let's see what else. So we can play around with the third person. It looks like we need to move it like to the right and down, especially when he ADSs. You can go back and see like it's like completely off. This is part of modding. Press F11, we'll escape, and we can go back to the blueprint. This is where you'll adjust some of these things to not go through everything. This is where we'll be able to do, so under this like hierarchy of the gun, we can go to third person position offset. So we can try like let's see, 0, maybe like -10, and then I don't know, we'll leave it at F15. Save compile, we'll go back into the game and just see how our changes are. Blueprints are where you, for the blueprints, that's kind of where you're editing everything. Okay, so like that's already better, right? And that's just kind of like my judgment guess. We'll try to aim down sight, see how it looks. Okay, so we need to go further to the right, and then maybe forward. So we'll try that again. So we went to 0, so we'll try like -8. We'll try like 20. I don't know, 12. Play. Go back. So the stock's clipping through the backpack a little bit, but like that's already significantly better. And we can see when we ADS, see how that looks like. So like that's already like not that bad. Can move this, but yeah, that's already looking like a lot better. And we'll go back, and there's some other things we can adjust here as well, such as the first person position. We can do other things like animations. If you wanted to import your own custom animations, you obviously would have those files, and then you would bring them in here. We're just inheriting from the current M4's animations. So that's what's happening there. There are other modifiers in here as well. We can change the muzzle effect. Like right now it's like a flash. Obviously we want a suppressor. Because the gun's suppressed, we probably want to change the audio. So there's sound here. We can change the first person firing, the dry sounds. If we put a suppressed sound, for example, it would make more sense for this weapon. And that's just here. All it is it's literally like an audio file. You know, you press it here and you press the arrow button just to change it. I could probably try to do it with some sort of suppressed weapon just to kind of try it. MK18. If we can find a suppressed sound. These are M16. Let's see if I don't know, we can try something like that, right? So we'll click here and we'll click there. I'll try to just see how it changed it. And there's sound cues. There's kind of like what they have is a mix of different suppressed sounds that'll randomize, so the gun doesn't sound as stagnant, as it does, because it's replaying the same audio file. But that is essentially the big things for the tutorial. Trying to think anything else. We've essentially imported the gun. We got our model. We configured the model in Blender, scaled it, did everything appropriately, matched it to the gun in-game, and imported it into Unreal, into the SDK, set it up to what we're supposed to set it up to. And the last step would essentially be exporting and uploading to the workshop. And that pretty much wraps things up. I hope I was able to shine the light on how to import a gun into the OHD SDK. The whole means of me wanting to do this in the first place was I was able to get a lot of help from other people in the Discord for OHD, the devs as well, asking them questions numerous amount of times, how I can achieve what I just showed you. So after compiling a decent amount of information, I figured why not share it to the community of people interested to achieve the same thing. So I hope I was able to achieve that for you. If you have any other questions, feel free to go to the OHD Discord, ask away, learn away. There's a lot of people doing different kinds of modding. You might find your place there. But if you've completed the tutorial and brought your first gun in, congratulations. Hopefully we get to see some of your mods in the community. And that should be all. You guys have a good one. I'm CVAP. Bye-bye.